We are back with UFC Vegas 62 this Saturday. We have 12 fights this weekend. I'm Jon Kelly. Let's hear the picks. Kicking things off, we have Pete Rodriguez, a minus 675 favorite. The comeback on Michael Jackson. The comeback on Mike Jackson is plus 500. Now, for starters, Pete Rodriguez is the biggest favorite on the card, which has a lot of people questioning what has he done to deserve being this big of a favorite. The answer is nothing really. He's a 4-1 prospect, very, very green, has never even fought into the second round. He's 4-1 with all 4 wins coming by first round knockout. And then he obviously was knocked out in the first round in his short notice UFC debut against Jack Della Maddalena. Now he's getting basically a layup spot to see if he can hack it in the UFC. If he can, then he should make quick work of Mike Jackson, who's a former photographer, good friends with Mick Maynard. That's really the only reason why he's on the UFC roster. And he's coming off the DQ win against Dean Barry, which was kind of like a laughing stock of a fight. The fact that those two put on one of the weirdest fights potentially ever, multiple eye gouges, point deduction, ended up being a DQ win. So even though Jackson basically got his bell rung multiple times by Barry, he ended up getting credited with the win. This guy's 37 years old. His durability is not good. His striking is not good. He comes from like a boxing background, but he's very awkward in terms of his footwork, his defensive liability. Like, I really don't rate him highly whatsoever. I don't even think he's a real mixed martial artist. And then on the flip side, Rodriguez, I mentioned how green he is, but we know he at least has power, and he's going to swing with everything that he has. So you're seeing the odds now, not just the money line, but the round 1 knockout prop by itself is already juiced to like minus 150. So basically everyone is expecting Rodriguez to win by first round knockout. I am as well. I am not going off the board with this one. I do think he gets the knockout finish, which makes him a very high upside play on DraftKings, but it's going to come with what will likely be heavy ownership. Which brings us to our next fight in the flyweight division, as Tatsuro Tyra comes in as a minus 230 favorite. The comeback on CJ Vergara is plus 195. Tyra's coming off his UFC debut. He looked pretty good in that spot against Carlos Candelario. Basically was able to out-grapple him for the majority of that fight, and that's really his base, is his high-level grappling. He's an undefeated prospect. I don't really rate him as like a superstar prospect, as I guess a lot of other people do, but I do think he's somewhat talented, especially in terms of the grappling. His takedowns aren't great, but he does have a really slick back take, and on the feet he does have some very heavy leg kicks as well, which I think he could have success with in this matchup. Vergara, he's got excellent cardio, and that's pretty much the one good thing you can say about him. On the feet, he does have a little bit of power, but he's a complete punching bag in terms of his defense. In the grappling exchanges, he gives up his back quite a bit. I think he could be taken down here. I think he could be controlled, and I actually think he could be submitted as well. So I don't hate Tyra by submission prop, depending on what number you can get. I think Tyra can probably have success grappling as long as he doesn't completely gas out in the third round and get finished. Then I think he gets his hand raised here. So we're going Tyra by submission. That's the official pick, and he's a pretty decent play on DraftKings as well. Which brings us to our next fight in the women's strawweight division, as Pyra Rodriguez comes in as a minus 165 favorite. The comeback on Sam Hughes is going to be plus 140. And this one, I do have some interest in the underdog here. I'm probably going to take a small poke on Hughes on the money line here, just because I view this as a pretty competitive fight. Pyra Rodriguez, I cashed with her against Kay Hansen her last time out, but she really didn't look as good as I expected. Honestly, I thought she could blow Hansen out of the water, and it was kind of competitive, right? And I expect this to be a competitive fight as well. It might just come down to who ends up in top position late in the fight. And with Hughes, at least we know she's got great cardio. She's won the third round in most of her UFC fights. She's improved her wrestling in her last couple of fights as well. And while I think Pyra Rodriguez has okay wrestling herself, she does tend to slow down. So even though I think she has a striking advantage, I do think the cardio is probably going to play a pretty big factor here. That's why I'm leaning towards the underdog on Hughes. I'll likely have more exposure to Hughes on DraftKings as well, just for the price savings. Next up in the featherweight division, Joe Anderson Brito comes in as a minus 390 favorite. The comeback on UFC newcomer Lucas Alexander is plus 325. And I think Brito pretty much has Alexander covered here. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on it because Alexander is taking this fight on short notice. I don't really think he's UFC level, at least not at this stage in his career. I do think you could take this guy down. I think you can control him in the grappling. He's actually been submitted in both of his professional losses, both times in the first round. And now he's going up against a very explosive fighter in Joe Anderson Brito, who does have power on the feet. We just saw him win by knockout against Andre Fili. We've also seen on Contender Series against a good grappler, he was able to take him down multiple times, stay out of harm's way on the mat, and control him for extended periods. So I do think Brito pretty much has all the bases covered here. So I'm going to go with Brito. Brito by submission, that's the official pick, and he's another decent play on DraftKings. I think he has multiple takedown upside, and I think he has finishing potential as well. Next fight up in the middleweight division, Nick Maximov comes in as a small favorite, minus 125 now. The comeback on Jacob Malcoon is plus 105. Malcoon money has been coming in all week, and this is one of those times where I really got to say I don't understand the line movement. I do think Maximov is the rightful favorite here. I'm going to be betting Nick Maximov. I'm just waiting at this point because there tends to be so many people out there that love the Jacob Malcoon side that the line just keeps getting closer and closer. So I like Maximov here. I think it's going to be basically a pure grappling fight. Both of these guys are looking to do the same things. Both of them rely on that single leg. Maximov, I think, is going to be the bigger fighter, potentially a strength advantage in those grappling exchanges. I do think he's the more dangerous submission grappling threat, despite being caught and submitted by Andre Petroski his last time out. I just think he's the better grappler in what's going to play out as a pure grappling match. So give me Maximov here as the small favorite. I think both of these guys have multiple takedown upside on DraftKings, but I will be leaning towards the slight favorite in Nick Maximov. And next up, Victor Henry comes in as a sizable favorite at minus 390. The comeback on Rafael Sunsal is plus 320. And this is probably the fight that I'm maybe the least excited to watch. I don't expect much from a Sunsal. You know, he's a legend of the fight game, but at 40 years old in the bantamweight division, I do think it is time he probably hangs it up. He's on a 4-fight losing streak. He's been finished in 3 of his last 4 fights, and this is a guy that historically was a durable fighter earlier in his career. And obviously some of those losses have come against top tier competition, but I just don't think he has much at this stage left in his career. And he's going up against a guy in Victor Henry who looked excellent in his debut against Ronnie Barcelos. Landed over 180 significant strikes in that fight. Excellent cardio. This guy's going to put a pace on a Sunsal, who's historically a very low-pace style fighter. He's not going to be able to keep up the volume, and now we have to worry about the durability as well. So I'm not putting much stock into the veteran here. I think Victor Henry wins, and I think he probably scores pretty decent on DraftKings. Which brings us to our next fight, as Mana Martinez comes in as a minus 155 favorite with Brandon Davis on the comeback at plus 135. And this is one where I don't really trust either guy for a couple of reasons. Mana Martinez, for starters, yes, he's a powerful striker. 8 of his 9 wins have come by knockout. He's got big power in the striking, but that's basically all he has. When you force this guy to grapple, he's going to tire out. You can control him on the mat. You could potentially submit him as well. And he's very hittable in striking exchanges too. So there's definitely a lot of reasons why you can't really trust this guy moving forward. And then the reason why I'm not interested in backing the dog here in Brandon Davis is because he looked pretty washed his last time out against Batra Dana, where he got knocked out in the first round, basically was stung with every single punch, but also just seemed to be sort of a shell of himself, wasn't really moving as well as he had previously in the UFC. I think the years in the fight game are really starting to wear on his body. He's had reconstructive knee surgery. I think there's real big red flags that he just might be shot at this point, and he's going up against a power puncher. If you told me Davis was going to come in and grapple, then I'd maybe have interest in him, but the guy just doesn't do it. Despite being a good submission grappler, or at least a decent grappler, he just really doesn't look to do it. Averages less than 1 takedown per 15 minutes here. So I think it is going to be a striking match. I favor Martinez's durability and his power. So the pick is going to be Martinez by knockout. Kicking off the main card is the only light heavyweight bout on the card, as Alonzo Menifield comes in as a minus 205 favorite with Misha Cirkunov on the comeback at plus 175. And this is a fight where I don't really think you could put a lot of faith in either of these guys to fight the right game plan. We've seen it time and time with Alonzo Menifield. The guy has clear big knockout power, but he only has that for about 3 to 5 minutes in most of his fights. And he also, the fight IQ just isn't there. He invites guys to clinch with him up against the fence, which while he has good takedown defense and he's not bad in the clinch, it just gasses him out that much quicker. So I just don't put a lot of faith in him because historically he's had one of the worst fight IQs. And then on the flip side, Misha Cirkunov, I think the durability is a real concern here. He's been knocked out 4 times in his career, been finished in 7 of his 8 professional losses here, was just submitted by Wellington Turman. I do think he has a grappling advantage in this matchup, and if Menifield is gonna invite him into those, pummeling situations up against the fence, then maybe he could potentially threaten with some sort of choke there. But outside of that, if Menifield lets his hands go, I think he could bomb on him, and I think he could get him out of here. So everything in this fight points me to an under. It points me to a finish here. I just don't trust either guy. I'm going to hedge it on DraftKings, have exposure to both sides with a slight lean towards the favorite in Alonzo Menifield. Menifield by knockout is the official pick. And speaking of fights that I like to end in a finish, this next one has Dusko Todorovic squaring off against the Beverly Hills Ninja. Todorovic is a minus 200 favorite currently with the Beverly Hills Ninja Jordan Wright on the comeback at plus 170. And I just expect this to be fireworks from the get-go because that's the only speed that Jordan Wright knows. That's why we like him. He's going to come forward. He's going to swing bombs. He's going to basically go for everything that he's got inside the first round. And if it doesn't work and that finish doesn't materialize, then he's probably going to get clipped and finished himself. So I do expect this one to end early, which means we do want a heavy exposure on DraftKings. I am going to lean with the underdog, at least in terms of DraftKings exposure, because I do think his win condition is clearly round 1. Not that Todorovic isn't, but I do think there is scenarios where Todorovic maybe cage pushes a lot, controls him against the fence. He's not really a super aggressive finisher either. So I am going to lean with the underdog here. I just think he has a little bit more upside, but there's obvious risk concerns. The guy's defensively liable, especially swinging in the pocket, leaves himself wide open to be encounters, and obviously does not react well when he gets clipped here. So I do think either guy can win by finish. I'm going to lean with Jordan Wright just because I like the price savings and the round 1 finishing upside. And next up in the flyweight division, this is the fight that I have circled. I think it's the best fight on the card. It's the one I'm most excited for. It's Askarov, a minus 255 favorite. The comeback on Brandon Raw Dog Royval is plus 215. And I think there is clear value on the underdog in Brandon Royval. For starters, I think Askarov is a good fighter, don't get me wrong, but he's also fighting on pretty thin margins in a lot of his fights. Like, it's very low volume. He has one way to win. He's got to take you down multiple times and control you in the grappling. And that is going to work against a lot of opponents. He is a skilled grappler. But against Brandon Royval, this is a very big number to cover in a guy who historically just brings a ton of variance into fights because of the way that he fights. He's very high-paced nature. He's going to move forward, throw everything in the kitchen sink at you in terms of the striking. He's a guy that goes for unorthodox style submissions. I think he could potentially out-scramble Askarov on the mat. I think he has better durability than Askarov, and we saw in Askarov's last fight against Kai Kara France, the cardio failed him in that spot. It's faded in the past as well. I think Royval is going to have a clear cardio edge. So if you're giving me the guy who I think is the better striker, the better scrambler, the more submission grappling upside, and he has the better cardio as well, and you're giving me him in the plus 200 range, I think it's a no-brainer bet. I think Brandon Royval is a clear value this weekend, and I think he's my favorite underdog on DraftKings. So give me Royval. I think he's going to give Askarov at least a few problems to deal with. Who knows if it'll come through, but I think it's at least going to be a major sweat if you're holding the Askarov tickets at a big juice price. So give me the dog in Royval. I think he wins this weekend. Which brings us to our co-main event as Jonathan Martinez comes in as a minus 205 favorite. The comeback on Cub Swanson is plus 175. And this one's an interesting matchup because on one hand, Martinez has never been a guy that I've rated super highly. You know, he's a good striker, but he's pretty one-dimensional. Does not have really any grappling, averages less than 1 takedown per 15 minutes, doesn't even really have a ton of punches that he throws. It's basically all leg kicks, very similar to Chris Gutierrez, with the powerful leg kicks. He's going to throw them repeatedly. He's good at managing distance. Where Martinez gets into problems is when he gets involved in pocket exchanges. He can be clipped. He's a little bit chinny. He's been knocked down 4 times in the UFC. Obviously was knocked out against Davey Grant as well. But on the flip side, Cub Swanson, I think there is some concerns here. He's moving down to 135 for the first time in his career. There's really no reasoning that I've found that he's doing it. So it's kind of tough to quantify, because I do think it is a tough cut for him to get down to 135. I do think he's been hurt to the body multiple times in the past. And against a striker like Martinez, who is going to throw a couple body kicks to deal with, there is concern there. And then on the flip side, Cub's a good striker, and if he can get inside and get past the legs of Martinez, he could potentially knock Martinez out as well. So I think this one is an interesting dynamic. I don't mind the under at plus money, but I'm not sure if I'm going to bet it, just because if Martinez does find himself up on the scorecards, he is a guy that likes to cruise, play it safe, not take any chances in the final round. So it could be a Martinez decision. Wouldn't be shocked at a knockout either way. I'm probably just going to hedge it out on DraftKings and take the easy way out, but the official pick is going to be Martinez by decision. Which brings us to our main event, as Alexa Grasso comes in as a minus 205 favorite. The comeback on Viviane Araújo is plus 175. And this one, I think we need to start out by saying this is a 5-round fight, and I think that's the biggest dynamic of this matchup, because if this were just a 3-round fight, I would have significant interest in betting Viviane Araújo. I do think she's the better submission grappler. I think she could land multiple takedowns here. The problem is her cardio is very, very unproven. The times we've seen her, even in 3-round fights, she's slowed down in basically all of them. It looked a little bit better against Andrea Lee her last time out, but most of that is because Lee was gassed herself. So in this fight against Grasso, I expect Grasso to be the better striker here. She's a better pure boxer. She's got great footwork, great speed. I think she's going to have multiple advantages there. And then if she gets taken down, whatever, as the fight goes on, she's going to be able to build into the later rounds. I expect her to win rounds 4 and 5 at a very high clip here. So I think she's the rightful favorite, pretty much based on cardio and striking alone. So the line makes sense here. I'm not going to bet it either way. I think this is a potential live betting spot. If maybe Araújo, who typically comes on strong in the first round, maybe she takes Grasso down, controls her for the first round, you probably get a better price on Grasso. Jump in live. I think that's the way that I'm going to look to play this fight. But the official pick is going to be Grasso by decision. Wouldn't be shocked at a finish if Vivi just completely gasses out. Maybe Grasso, submits her or gets like a TKO finish or something like that. But the pick is going to be Grasso by decision. I do think on DraftKings, this is not a must-have by any stretch. I think it's a solid fight to target, but there are paths, even on a 12-fight slate, where you can get away with fading the main event just to be unique and potentially get leverage on the field, because this is going to be one of the heavier owned fights on the entire slate. And as always, guys, you could check out fightnumbers.com, where I'll have ownership projections. I'll have DraftKings player rankings broken down by salary tier, fantasy points per minute as well. It's all completely free at fightnumbers.com. Do me a favor, like this video and subscribe if you don't already. I bring this type of content each and every week, have football content on my channel as well. All of it's completely free. I definitely appreciate the support, guys. Best of luck. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.